Well, thank you, James and Larry, for treating us to such a lovely chat. I'm so sorry to interrupt everybody like that, but just for the sake of time. Our next panel, Luminosity and Context, will begin to explore some of the threads that we've begun to unravel in that first keynote conversation. Our moderator is Denise Marconish, Martin Friedman Chief Curator at Madison Square Park Conservancy. Previously, she was Chief Curator at Mass MoCA, where she organized more than 50 exhibitions and produced more than a dozen publications. Joining Denise are artists Rachel Berwick, Gisela Colón, and Spencer Finch. Rachel Berwick's multimedia installations examine the threshold between nature and culture as a means of exploring themes of extinction and loss and our inevitable desire to recover what is lost. Gisela Colón is a Puerto Rican-American artist whose work traverses land intervention, sculpture, painting, video, and photography. She's best known for her abstract monoliths, which are tall, freestanding totemic forms. Spencer Finch is compelled by what he describes as, quote, the impossible desire to see oneself seeing, end quote. Finch holds up an enchanting prism between the outer world and inner thought. He distills his observations of the world into glowing abstract color, but also diverts them through cultural and historical filters. Please join me in welcoming Denise, Rachel, Gisela, and Spencer to the stage.
Thank you, everybody. So it does work. I don't know why I'm always surprised when technology works. Thank you all for being here. It's really exciting to get to share the stage with you and have this conversation, thinking about things like light and luminosity, which are all things that are important in your work. So I'm going to start by giving each artist here an opportunity to talk a little bit about their work. So we're just going to go in alphabetical order. So Rachel, that means you're up first. Do you want to control this so you know what pace you want to go at?
Two things at once.
So we're going to do these as like a 4-minute intro to who you
So I'm
are.
going to talk really fast.
Artists.
Okay.
Don't forget, there's a clock right there.
Oh, okay. No pressure. Okay, so the piece you're looking at is titled Zugenru, and it's one of many pieces I've done using the material amber. Amber has a very rich mythology that comes out of its physical and optical properties, one of those being its ability to refract light. So when it's lit in a particular way, it just glows as if alive. And there are a lot of cultures that believed it was a material that could give life or was alive. So here I'm I'm telling the story of the extinction of the passenger pigeon. So what I did was to cast about 500 pigeons from a taxidermied specimen and then place them on a sculpted tree within this, what's a mirror box in essence, and it's a two-way mirror, so architectural glass that's been treated so that depending on how it's lit, it appears either as a mirror or it's transparent. So, and as you walk into the installation, what you see is one tree with 500 birds in reflection becomes a forest with thousands of birds, and that's here we go. There we go, close-up of very hard to photograph, but close-up of the reflection. So it's a phantom image of this forest with thousands of birds, and that comes and goes as you walk around the piece. And then the next work is one of many pieces that I did using the structural blue, in essence. And it's a piece that I came to through birds again. I was researching bird migration through a Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship, and I discovered that the blue in bird feathers is actually a structural color. And I also discovered that basically the sky of the blue is through light scattering, and also glass, which is an amorphous solid, is actually a material that can cause light scattering as well. So this is actually cast out of glass, and what I did was to, when the glass is treated just in the right way, you can actually cause it to partially crystallize to then cause light scattering. So it reflects the blue and transmits oranges and yellows and reds. And Larry was talking a little bit about structural color. So I don't have time to go into it too much here, but this piece is a cast orientation cage, which is a device that's used to study bird migration. And what I was just aligned to was that idea of the structural color in bird feathers, and then, and I should say bird feathers also they're actually a keratin, so they're actually, they can allow light to enter, and based on their microscopic structure within the feathers, they then organize the light spectra and bounce them back out, and so you'll see basically the blue of a bird feather is a structural color. That's organized light scattering. This is random light scattering. And the last piece is, this is a film still from a project that I'm working on right now called Blue Chunk. And this was me just trying to contend with this idea of thinking about the materiality, or trying to materialize the immateriality of the blue of the sky. And so I cast about a 75-pound chunk of solid blue crystal, and then over the course of many, 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 many hours, I've been chiseling away at it, lighting it just so you get the blue to kind of luminesce. But also, every time you chip off a piece, a little tiny piece will come off, and then the blue, that dark blue, becomes a lighter blue. But also the little tiny spectra, the pieces of specks that come off of it, are kind of being atomized or dematerialized as they break off from the piece. So that's it. That was my time.
That was a real speed go through. Okay, I think Gisela is next.
Do I just press?
Yeah, just advance it. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so my work, I've labeled it, for my own understanding and the way I work, I've labeled it organic minimalism. And for me, it's a blending of principles of art, science, and nature. And the origin story of these monolithic forms comes from my upbringing in Puerto Rico. You know, I grew up on a farm in Puerto Rico, surrounded by the highs of the highs and the lows of the low. So beautiful nature, rainforest, flora, fauna, biodiversity that was very generative and nurturing, but at the same time surrounded by personal experiences of gun violence, familial as well as collective experiences in Puerto Rico with militarized colonialism. So I grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in San Juan, and you know, we had a lot of military incursions in Vieques, the Cerro Maravilla murders of 1978, when I was 12 years old. So there was a lot of violence generally, both, you know, familial and collectively. And so the origin story of these monumental pieces, you know, stem from that. So at first glance, there might be reminiscent of, you know, bullets, projectiles, aircraft fuselages, but through the power of nature that I learned, like for example, when I was 8 years old and I'd be upset, I'd run out on the farm and there was this eucalyptus tree. And I would sit on the curved branch of the tree and I would peel the bark for hours, which was a very soothing and calming activity. And I would marvel of the tapestry that would emerge from the tree of textures and colors. And then I'd come back the next day or a couple of days later and I'd see how the tree had healed itself. And this was a seminal experience for me very early on, where I realized that nature has the power to heal and provides us with a lot of the answers that we need in our lives, you know, on the planet, and that we're all interconnected through the passage of time, you know, from the Big Bang, where we were elements that became atoms, that became molecules, that then transformed into the bodies that we carry. So that power of nature is basically transformative, and I apply it in my sculpture. So what you're really looking at is a bullet transformed into a mountain and into these primal singular forms that humans have gravitated to for thousands of years. For example, an amulet, a totem, an Egyptian obelisk, a Roman column. And when you study prehistory and antiquity, we've always seen that humans have been drawn to these forms. And why? Why these Platonic primal forms? Because they're conduits to the metaphysical, to what Larry was just saying, that feeling of awe and wonder. So that's what I strive for in my work, this feeling that, that you can transcend your own personal subjective experience into a greater whole and consciousness for the amazing planet that we live on, you know, like a larger perspective. You know, we live on the blue ball floating in space, but we're really part of a greater cosmic existence. And so I look for that questioning with my work, that sense of awe and wonder. I didn't go through all of them.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, then we'll later.
I'm just going to talk briefly about 3 projects that I did. This is the very first public artwork I did. It was at a border station in Canada, at Calais, Maine, and it was called The Impossibility of White. And there are all these ellipses that are based on John Ruskin's ideal of the field of vision. And the idea was that they would rotate in the wind and create different colors as they moved and reflected the landscape. It was for the GSA, the General Services Administration, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and the architect of the station, of the building behind, recommended a fabricator, and which had an engineer, and I was very excited about the project, and put all the money from the project into the project, of course. And I was up there for the installation, everything went well. You can see the sort of color from the sunset, the shadows, kind of working as I dreamed it would work. And then a week later, I got an email from the people at the border station, and the whole thing had blown to smithereens. And so my lesson from that moving forward was get a good engineer. Don't use moving parts, and don't trust architects. Here's a more recent work, which actually has moving parts. I must say I didn't follow my own advice, but it wasn't my moving parts. And this is called the Color Wheel, and it was 2 different revolving doors at the University Library in Uppsala in Sweden. And one door had the primaries, red, green, and blue, and the other had secondary films of violet, blue, and green, and violet, orange, and green, and I think in the context of today's panel, I think I was just trying to be inside a Larry Bell. So it was really just like trying to be in a Larry soup, and it just sort of going in the door and just going around and around and around, and which was a real pleasure for me, and I hope it's a pleasure for the people who use the library. So the colors mix as you move through. And this is a recent work that I did at MIT that is in the new computer science building. And it's based on, what was interesting about this was that the computer scientists wanted nothing with technology. So, and I think because they realize how quickly things become obsolete. So this is actually a material that's, it's made by these guys in LA called Sparkle Masters, and it's just little discs that hang on panels and move very slightly in the wind. And when people walk by or the HVAC system moves, it moves the air. These little discs move, and it's the configuration. The tiling is based on certain ideas of the possibility of old computer science, sort of the limits of computer science, and the color, which is mixed color, is based on these sort of ambiguous colors, and was really more about ideas about AI, which I don't understand at all. But I was interested actually in Larry's experience at MIT, which was so different, and when he was able to work with Howard Edgerton and sort of understand on the same level. And I was bemoaning to Denise earlier about how now science and art is so specialized that it's hard to have that meeting of minds. So.
What is that fabricator called again? Sparkle
Masters.
Sparkle Masters. There is somebody, a company out there called Sparkle Masters.
Yeah, it's two brothers who went to SVA, actually.
Oh, really?
Who kind of work in their mother's basement in LA.
Oh, that is like my favorite thing ever. I've got to look up the Sparkle Masters. The Sparkle Masters brothers, yes. Knowing all of your work, but then also, seeing these examples and hearing you talk makes me think a little bit about, Spencer, what you were ending with, this idea of science, but also this idea of research. I think all of you have a deep research practice to how you get to these, what can be seen as more abstract, more minimal objects. So I wonder if, and like Larry said, feeling. There's, you start with feeling, but then each one of you has this sort of deeper context underneath that initial feeling. So I wonder if you can each talk a little bit about what kind of research process drives you, and what are your starting points? So maybe Rachel, do you want to start?
Oh, great. Pick on me again.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I work with themes of loss and our desire to recover what's lost, and the impossibility of that, but the importance of the attempt, even in the face of probable failure. And I work with natural history, so I sort of look for stories that lend themselves to that. But then by the same token, I look for materials whose physical and optical properties lend themselves to that. So that's like, for me, it's all, I'm searching for materials that will speak to me in terms of those themes, and then working with them and learning about them. And as I learn them, and it's like research comes in the form of taking the material and doing stuff to it and seeing how it talks back to you. And so that's like a real investigative process that you can really only get intimate with material through that, right? And that's research, right? But it's also, we were talking about this before, it's like, you ask a scientist, they'll tell you what it'll do, but then that takes away that whole opportunity that artists, at least artists who do this, right, can make discoveries. Because when a material is doing something wrong, that might actually be right for the message you want to tell. And how are you going to discover that unless you actually have that experience with it, Yeah. So it's asking questions of the material and then learning how to listen to it, speak back.
And I'll take the clicker back.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so in my work, what I do is I research. I've worked in 3 different UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And so I start by researching the cultural conditions, the history of the site, ethnographic conditions. And so in the example of Saudi Arabia, let me see, can I go back? Yeah, so in Saudi, this was 6 years ago for Desert X. The theme was basically opening up the country, Vision 2030, and I create these pigments that refract the light, very much the way that Larry works, and as Rachel was just saying about structural color. So the carbon fiber is a sustainable material that these are made out of, and then on top of the surface of the carbon fiber, I apply these pigments that contain very like nano jewel-like particles that refract the light in different ways to yield what we call structural color, which is replicating the processes that occur in nature and contain a fluid color spectrum. So as you move around the work, the color is constantly shifting, so you're really experiencing color as refracted light. And in the case of Saudi, this iridescent finish was meant to symbolize the vision for the future of change and transformation and growth. In the case of the pyramids of Giza, well, obviously gold is a divine material for Egypt, and the reclining dome is referring to their, astrological history of basically being, very at the forefront of studying the stars and the sun and how all the cosmic world would depend, the flooding of the Nile, their sustenance. So basically speaking to that ancient history of Egypt, and the fluid color spectrum that I developed for this was very difficult, because how do you refract light to embody all the spectrum of gold? So it went from green gold to gold to rose gold, and even copper as you moved around the piece. So yeah, that was a hard one. And then here for Brazil, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is the monumental axis of the capital of Brasilia, which was founded ex nihilo, meaning out of nothing, by Lucio Costa, Oscar Niemeyer in 1959, and built out of nothing. And everything in Brasilia is white. And Oscar Niemeyer made these giant 50-foot floating pools of water because he wanted to bring the sky and the clouds down onto the earth. And so I developed a pigment that was basically white that refracted into all of the colors that occurred from the sky and the surrounding references to the architecture and the history of Brasilia, of modernism. So that's what I do. I really love the challenge of that kind of stuff.
Interesting to think of that, Spencer, with your impossibility of white.
I'm not sure where the research starts or where the ideas come from, and I have a constant fear that it's all just going to dry up, and so I think that's probably not unusual for artists. And I think the ideas come from different places. Like I had a job for many years in publishing, and I was reading a lot of different things that weren't related to art, and sometimes something would come up that from just my reading in work that then became an artwork, and then just I think also living in New York City, there are certain things that happen. For example, once I was on the F train, and it came up out of the tunnel at Carroll Street, and it had been raining, and there was this rainbow, and everyone in the car moved over to the window, and like the whole car it felt like it was going to tip off the track, and it was just a magical moment, and I ended up making a weird piece about that, and then just also looking at other art. I mean, I'm hoping, I first saw Larry's show at night, which was kind of unexpected, and it was fantastic, and then it's totally different during the day, and I'm hoping there's something I can steal from that I can use for my own purposes.
Art theft is the best form of flattery. That and when another artist is like, God damn that artist. Those are like always the two best things. I think I love that example of the rainbow. There's this incredible, this great book by Philip Fisher called Wonder, the Rainbow and the Aesthetics of Rare Experience. And it's very much about the literature of wonder, but he also uses the rainbow as this example of wonder. And for him, wonder is something that is a surprise and that happens and that we don't expect. And what I love about the example of the rainbow is it's something we see all the time, yet still creates those conditions of surprise and unexpectedness. Like we still, even as adults, even though we've seen at this point in our life hundreds of rainbows, it still produces that. And I think that is something that I see in all of your work, that sense of using light and luminosity and color and this depth of research to create these moments that stop people. I think this is true of Larry's work. So I wonder what your relationship is to how wonder factors into your work, and how, especially in the public, how that interplays with what you're doing. And I often think of the materiality and the experience, and how do you balance that with with this more in-depth research and meaning. Like, I always wonder, is it okay if people don't understand where it comes from?
Totally.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gisela.
So I think there's a long line starting in modernism with, you know, minimalism and light and space prescribing what the viewer's supposed to feel, or at least different theories, starting with like Frank Stella, what you see is what you see, or Judd saying, you know, this is an autonomous object that has nothing to do with the viewer, or, you know, James Turrell, individual perception, you know, we want you to see yourself seeing. And I think in that lineage, I would hope that my work posits a feeling of realizing that you're alive and connecting to that sense of organic life on the planet, and taking it one step further, more than even an individual perception, it's collective perception. Because I think we're at a crossroads on our planet right now where we can't just afford to be individual anymore and just say, oh, it's about me having a perceptual experience. That's great, but we also could perceive ourselves as part of a whole ecosystem on the planet that is part, maybe not as important even as plants or animals. So there's this hierarchy that we've always said, you know, we're human-centric, but there's so much more than human-centric anymore. And I would hope that my work elicits that feeling of wonder, but then after you get past what the hell am I looking at, that you would have a sense of, I'm bigger. I mean, the planet is much bigger than just me as an individual, and how do I fit into making the world a better place? You know, it's like an organic feeling of wonder that I'm hoping to create.
I would say, yeah, I'll what she said. That's good. I think there are lots of there are layers to understanding. Like there's this specific information of something, but there's also like a deeper understanding that we have that might be emotionally driven. It certainly comes through perception, right? And so this, like seeing the rainbow, catching a rainbow, and stopping for a moment to care. You do care. It's a sign of caring. And even anything that will make somebody do that, to me, is what's so interesting. And so when I look for materials that have this ability, they're kinetic in the simplest terms, but they are, you know, they're dynamic. So when somebody's walking around, like the Zuganru piece, you know, at first it's like one tree with 500 birds. You walk up to it, and then suddenly you start seeing things, right? And it's changing constantly, and you lose and you find, and you lose and you find. You don't have to know the specific story of the passenger pigeon loss to know you're losing something, right? And just through your own perception and your kind of, right, investment in. So I think there are levels of understanding. Yeah, and I don't know.
I guess the work that I like most by other artists is work that I return to and get a different experience each time. And so I guess that's kind of what I aspire to. And so, I mean, there's certain very different kinds of artwork and very different from what I make myself that I have returned to, you know, sometimes a decade in between. And I sometimes see something I didn't see before, or I have this experience or epiphany that's different. And so I think that, and I don't know what that, you know, that's some sort of magic in the work, and I there's no prescription for it, I don't think, but that's what I aspire to have the work that rewards return viewing.
Yeah, that is always, I think, the secret sauce of, you know, why do certain things never leave you? They don't leave your brain and your body, and I think that is the sort of true definition of wonder. So I see that our clock has ticked to our time. That was fast and furious, and I really appreciate all of you and the conversation we were just able to have. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much.
clock really works.
Okay. I'm glad. I'm very glad. Not to put pressure. Oh. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Denise, for leading such a wonderful conversation, and Rachel, Gisela, and Spencer for sharing your insights. Honestly, you guys have given me so many notes. My future research on structural color is incredibly grateful to you all. We'll head right into our next panel, which will be led by Jason Rosenfeld, who's professor of art history at Marymount Manhattan College, and we have one of his classes here with us today. Jason's also a senior writer and editor-at-large at the Brooklyn Rail, where he writes widely about contemporary art and museum exhibitions. Joining Jason are artists Carl Davila, Torkwase Dyson, and Anthony McCall. Carl Davila works in a sculptural idiom that is decidedly hypervisual, artisanal, and history-laden. He has developed proprietary sculptural processes that co-opt existing means of traditional and industrial production. Torkwase Dyson describes herself as a painter working across multiple mediums to explore the continuity among ecology, infrastructure, and architecture. Dyson's abstract works are visual and material systems used to construct fusions of surface tension, movement, scale, and real and finite space. Anthony McCall is known for his solid light installations, a series that he began in 1973 with the film Line Describing a Cone, in which a form composed of projected light slowly evolves in three-dimensional space. Occupying a space amid sculpture, cinema, and drawing, his work has been recognized for its historical importance in group exhibitions across the globe. Please join me in welcoming Jason, Carl, Torkwase, and Anthony to the stage. I think we might just be waiting for Jason in that intermission that we had. That one's fully on me. I was so on time that I didn't double check. Here. Nope, you're good to go.
Okay, welcome to everyone. The last panel of the day. Before we rock out, the musical performance is coming. I want to thank Carl, Anthony, and Torkwase for being with us today. My name is Jason Rosenfeld. We're talking about the idea of abstraction in public art and its capacity to offer open-ended, imaginative, and thought-provoking discoveries in the public realm. And that, I think, is what Madison Square Park Conservancy has been doing forever. And I was trying to think about abstract shows since 2004 that were in the park that really struck me. Mark de Souvero, Saul LeWitt, Raphael Lozano Hemmers. You might remember his participatory, circulatory, light-based Pulse Park in 2008. I remember bringing my students there. Jessica Stockholder's show, Mel Kendrick, Charles Long, Teresita Fernandez, Sheila Pepe, and Leo Villarreal, who is here today. And that idea that these are so different from Antony Gormley's show, for example, and figurative art, which operates in a very different way. So I want to focus on that with our three panelists today, but I also want to put in the back of their mind the idea that public art is something that kind of connects with you, I think, at a young age. It's something that you see before you recognize it, and that you kind of begin to understand as you get older. Anthony has a great line about the idea of the accidental spectator, which we've heard about today also, where you stumble on something, you're like, hey, what the heck is that? And then it kind of sticks in your mind, and then it clarifies later. So I want you all to think. You don't have to answer right now. I'll get you eventually. Your early memories of public art. I have two. I'll just mention them and not comment. One is Louis Kahn's Trenton Bathhouses and Abrams Summer Camp from 1955 in Ewing, New Jersey, at the Jewish Community Center, where my grandmother worked and where I swam as a young kid. And Nicky de Saint-Phal's Golem, or the Monster, which is this massive structure that has sliding boards in it from 1972 in Jerusalem that I experienced when I was very young, and then found out what they were when I was in grad school. And then it made a totally different sense. And that's the beauty of public art, I think, and it can impact you, as we were just hearing about in the last panel, as you progress through life and as you visit it over and over. But also the question that isn't all public art in the open abstraction. I'll leave you to think about that. So to start with Anthony McCall, it's a little awkward because you can't see what's going on, but you know in your mind what we're seeing on the screen here. Maybe you want to angle angle the chairs a little bit. Anthony McCall is British, but has lived in New York City for 52 years, part of what I call the British invasion in art, coming to New York. This is a project I've been working on for a while. He gave me a couple projects he'd like to talk about. The one is called Crossing the Elbe in Hamburg, which was in 2013 to 2014. 2013 to 2014. Anthony started doing work initially, which was kind of landscape art tinged with performance. There's a film of Landscape for Fire from 1972, where he's setting alight a kind of 6x6 grid of liquid gas fires, wearing, what kind of suits were those that you wear in that film, Anthony? Proletarian. They're just working like jumpsuits, right?
Yeah, that was connected to the fact that the performance went from dusk to darkness, and we were shooting in 16mm film, and had we had anything but white, we wouldn't have been able to film the figures.
Oh, I see. So you could see it against the dark. Worth checking out, Landscape for Fire, 1972, reperformed in July 2011. He says, I became a filmmaker because I felt the need to record these ephemeral events, but then moved into working on some larger public projects like the one you see on the screen. So maybe walk us through a little bit, please, this project for Hamburg.
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. Very pleased to be here. Would you change the slides when I signal?
I'm on it.
Okay, very good. Yeah, this is a piece that was commissioned in Hamburg by two museums, Sammlung Falkenberg and the Deichterhallen. And it basically uses the city of Hamburg as my armature for the piece, which is made of light. And it has three 2-mile-long, narrow-focused searchlights, which form the substance of the piece. Next slide, please. And there, the 3 searchlights were run by 3 lamps, obviously, and these were placed on strategic points in the city of Hamburg, and the beams themselves are changed in direction every week. But basically, the piece comes on at 90 minutes after sunset, and it's on for 21 minutes before it goes off. That's the rhythm for a whole year. and but the actual beams change direction by 15 degrees once a week. So there's a kind of variety whereby at some point every neighborhood in Greater Hamburg is visited by one or more of the beams. Next slide. This is typical, this is one of 3 drawings when I was working out the direction of the beams and the change in angle. Next one. So this shows you the variety you can get over a 12-week period.
Are you looking here for kind of interstices, or was it sort of oriented in a way that it's not like drawing the circle, earlier works that you did where it makes a complete circle. Maybe some of you have seen that in a museum, the works that are discrete and in darkened rooms. But this was feels more random.
Hamburg is the circle.
Okay.
If you like.
The radius.
And then we're drawing lines across it.
And the 3 places where they're sited are significant, though.
They're on the 3 tallest buildings in Hamburg.
Okay. Was Hamburg destroyed in the war? So
it was obliterated.
Obliterated, okay.
Yeah.
And it's a major port city.
It's a major port city, yeah. So these diagrams and the maps, enlarged maps, were recorded on the websites of the 2 museums, and it was possible to go with the pinpoint accuracy to a part of the city where you maybe think you may get a good view of one or more of the beams. But that's also, when I was there, I realized that there's such a thing as an accidental spectator. In fact, one might think in a piece like this, most of the spectators would be accidental until they become engaged and informed and realize that they can follow the piece if they wish. But if not, that's fine too.
So there wasn't like a big press blitz where people are aware of it, and it became this was pre-Instagram, right? So you couldn't put it on your social media.
But there was a certain amount of social media, yes, and press. Next, please. So this is view from the ground, the important view. I think the thing that struck me about this, when the piece was actually running, was compared to the clamor and noise and alarms of the city itself on the street, the beam was utterly silent and utterly immovable, and that had a kind of peace to it. And it was just skimming the rooftops of the neighborhoods of Hamburg.
I mean, do you feel like there's some kind of relation to arc lamps lighting up the sky? Like, I'm thinking about the London Blitz and this idea of, I know that the lights were stationary, so they just shot sort of parallel across to the landscape. They didn't go.
They were more or less just skimming the rooftops.
Okay. Just
out of reach of the buildings. And in fact, sometimes if there was a very tall building in the way, we just had to go around it, so to speak.
Right. So you didn't wake people up all night, keep them up all night. But I mean, I in my mind, I'm thinking of the bat signal. It seems something like that. But of course, that's silly, yes. But it's also, sometimes you see photographs of it, and it's a very sharp beam. Sometimes you see photographs like this, and it's very beautifully diffuse.
Well, Hamburg is quite a humid city. And that little bit of humidity is actually quite useful for the visibility of the lamps. It does a lot of work.
So every night it's totally different. Every week the angle changed, but every night it looks totally different.
And the fact that it always starts 90 minutes after sunset means that the clock time of day when it starts changes by 1 to 2 minutes a night. So in the summer it begins very late. Yeah. In the winter it begins very early, but it's still 90 minutes after sunset.
I must say, I think it's quite a remarkable thing. I mean, many of you in New York know on September 11th, we have the memorial to the Twin Towers, which I live in the West Village, and you can see it everywhere, right? It's amazing. And it changes depending on the atmospheric conditions. Sometimes it hits the clouds, and it looks spectacular.
Yeah.
These sort of light effects, and also the idea that you're talking about, it's a durational work of art.
Very much so, and there are 3 possibilities that someone can try to pick out from the map. When you might see 1 beam, you might see 2, and occasionally you'll see 3 at once. and that changes as over the weeks and months as the piece unfolds.
Did you ever get an overhead view of it, a photograph? And this is a design on the left. But was there any overhead photography of it? This is sort of pre-drones.
No, it was simply easier to make a rendering.
Yeah. It exists only in the mind. So one more project by Anthony, which I'll show you, which is rather closer to home, although not executed.
Yeah.
On the left is the Poughkeepsie Highland Railroad Bridge, postcard from around 1900. And on the right is what you see now if you've been up to Poughkeepsie, the home of Vassar College. Walkway over the Hudson State Historic Park, which they built that connect the two sides of the Hudson River there on top of the old 19th century railway structure.
May I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so this project, still as yet unrealized, though it was conceived in 2006, I was invited by Diane Shamash of the Minetta Book Foundation, who some of you may remember. Sadly, she's no longer with us. And she specialized in projects in the Hudson Valley. This was the Poughkeepsie Railroad Bridge, which is about half a mile across. Okay, next slide. This shows the concept, which is the idea was that every strut of the bridge would be lined with a string of white LED lights under the control of a single computer. And the bridge would very slowly light up from darkness. It would gradually begin to light up, and it would take 6 months to be fully lit. That's a rate of about 15 feet per night. And then the bridge begins to unlight. Next slide, please. And you'll see from this diagram very clearly what the structure is. You go from dark bridge to dark bridge in a year.
It reminds me of, I teach this at Marymount Manhattan College, and shout out to my students who are here. Go Griffins on the side there. The idea of ceremonial architecture. Think of something like Stonehenge, which is geared to the seasons, geared to the sun, geared to the solstices. And you have that here, right? It goes totally dark on the bottom there, June 22nd, and then it's fully lit on December 22nd, a sort of oscillating light line that it pulses across, and then it pulses back.
Part of the reason for the duration is that I think it's possible with slowness, which has always been a value in all my indoor work as well. Gives an opportunity for someone to insert themselves into the project, and I've always imagined it's like a calendar. So that's probably in mid-May. That shot you saw, that painting you saw earlier.
And this.
And yeah, here it is, actually a rendering of how it would look if it were actually realized. But I like the idea that someone might hang their birthday on a particular moment in the bridge's life.
Yeah.
And I see this as a cyclical structure which would last for at least 5 years. So it would become part of the landscape.
Yeah, we need to get this funded, Anthony, somehow.
Exactly.
I think about illuminated bridges. I just drove up to West Point on Tuesday night, Veterans Day. So the GWB was illuminated. It's quite amazing when it's lit up. Should be lit up every night. Also, you think about Leo Villarreal's work at San Francisco, the Bay Lights, which lasted for, I think, a decade, 10 years, 2013 to 2023, with these changing patterns across the Bay Bridge in San Francisco that were randomized and never repeated. Really beautiful project, which, as I read, Leo can tell us, they're trying to get funding to start that up again. But this idea of bridges and illuminations, and I wonder, was it something from your childhood or something that got you connected or hooked on light?
Well,
Quick answer.
The piece is called Crossing the Hudson. The previous one was called Crossing the Elbe. At the time, in my indoor projections as well, I was interested in the idea of mortality and the poetic ways of talking about that, as in crossing.
Yeah.
Both of the pieces cross rivers.
Did you ever see the illuminations in Blackpool?
I never did.
But the difference is with Blackpool, the GWB, et cetera, that those are not about durational time, right? That's, I think, the most remarkable thing about what Anthony's proposing for these projects. So Anthony's last solo show in New York was at Pioneer Works in 2018, and Sean Kelly Gallery 2018-19. Yep. I think I'm right? Yep. Is there a new one? Is there something on the horizon?
Well, I've just finished a number of projects. There was one at Tate Modern and one at Guggenheim Bilbao. And there's a few, but there's nothing coming up in New York in the next year that I know of.
Okay.
Sorry.
You never know. Thank you. So turning to Carl, his work called Broadway Hubbub, which is up now until Sunday, right? Monday, extended to Monday. They keep extending, it's good. My student Alexander Reyes, who is in the audience, there you go, gave a brilliant presentation on two of the works a few weeks ago. You can see you have to go from 117th Street all the way down to 64th Street by Lincoln Center to see the 5 of the works. I recommend it. You get your steps in and you see some cool things. It is a project of your gallery and also the Broadway Mall Association. But just to talk about, Carl, your public art, we met last year at Dashwood Projects where Carl had a show of his drawings, and I was looking at these things, and there were some interesting sketches that seemed to be in an exterior environment. And we got to talk. That was our meet cute at Dashwood. And we started talking about this, saying, what is the nature of your public work? And you said, actually, I have a project which is opening in a few months, and that's how this happened. So maybe talk very briefly about these earlier projects on the right, Lith, 2016, 2017 at Art Omi in Ghent, New York, upstate in Columbia County. And on the left, a couple other Liths at the Art Center at Duck Creek, East Hampton on the East End from 2021. These, I understand, are your first works that you did public or larger scale works.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me and thanks for coming. Lith on the right was the first large scale work of this sort that I had done in 2017. And it was interesting. We met in the context of that drawing show because, there's a lot of drawing in these. And the whole thing, this whole part of my project kind of started. I've been working with some minimal forms and usually kind of in a dialogue with texture. And then I just did a drawing where one was slumping down, and it was just kind of leaning down, and I felt a kind of potency in that. And this idea of something that was supposed to be this iconic minimal form sort of slumping down on itself and changing and becoming whimsical and becoming playful and goofy and in a way kind of male and female, this kind of Venus of Willendorf kind of that this thing turned into.
I call it the Gumby Pokey aesthetic.
No, there's definitely a healthy dose of cartooning. I was very glad that Larry Bell mentioned joy, because whimsy, humor, joy, important to me, important to be able to bring that, not just because I'm a joyful person, but I think it's kind of underutilized in a way. We need more, we need kind of more humor in contemporary art. So these were some of the first explorations, and the two on the left are at a center out in the Hamptons called Duck Creek. And I was really happy to have the works interact with vernacular architecture, which was something I thought would really work, and I was very happy that it did. And it kind of confirmed this idea that I have about these works, that they're essentially very anti-site specific. You could put them in the woods, you could lean them on a tree, you could lean them against a kind of shingle-style shack out in the Hamptons. I haven't done it yet, but I'm sure you could lean it against a chateau or a Parisian street corner, and it would all be fine. They have a kind of interiority to them.
So when you move them into the city's jar, to quote Matthew Arnold, they look very different, right? So on the left, we're going north to south. Pigeon, which is up at by Columbia on 117th, Spectre at 103rd, and Sap at 79th Street by the Dublin Pub. You see these in a very different way, a very different context, and all different colors and on these bases. Now, Larry was saying that he just makes the works and then lets someone else install them, but you pick the bases and the color and all these kinds of things.
I did,
go
but
with-
I love that idea.
Right,
I'm
much easier.
No,
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to do that. I was saying to you, I'm halfway there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm halfway there. But yeah, I walked up and down Broadway more times than any of you have in this past year, trying to figure this out. And yes, the things change definitely depending on the context. I mean, sap on the right certainly functions as a kind of sad tree. But again, there's always a contradiction that I'm interested in playing with, a kind of triumphant sadness or something. It's, you know, this kind of very well-fabricated minimal form of a grand scale, but then subverting it, making it a little sad or a little playful.
What is the material of these?
These are aluminum with auto body paint.
Here are the last two on the left. Hot Rod, 72nd Street, right by the old subway entrance, and Tandem at 64th and Lincoln Center.
Yeah, well, these guys, I guess Hot Rod is the Baroque one.
They're all a little Baroque.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of this work began when I studied in Rome when I was a young guy, and Baroque architecture had a huge influence on me, particularly Borromini. I couldn't believe the plasticity and the kind of, again, humor. I found them very funny, but also kind of anxious and incredibly well-crafted. And it's something that kind of stuck with me, that I could have a plasticity of form. Even these rigid forms, you know, in essence, Borromini was playing with these classical forms. So I'm taking some of these minimal forms and playing with them and letting them, essentially, they're monumental, but then they're like us. They're kind of slumping around, they're sitting, they're kind of hanging out.
They're schlubs.
They're schlubs. There's a kind of casualness that you're not expecting in a kind of monumental public sculpture, and approachability. At least that's what I'm going for.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if you appreciate this montage that I shot all of them sort of head on. They seem quite different when you look at them head on, right? They sort of address you in a different way, looking at them here. And Pigeon, you can't tell from the other side, but it's quite squat. And it is a little zoomorphic to a degree on the far left.
Definitely the most zoomorphic one. I like this. This is a good project, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you.
I like.
I mean, I can't make anything.
Yeah, this is good enough. I like Hot Rod and Sap are kind of, you know, inverse or complementary or something.
Yeah.
How one's wider at the bottom and one is kind of wider at the top. Again, playing a little bit with gesture, the subtle movement of a curve, and you know, there's a lot of drawing in these, and when I go to work on them, we get them in the computer, we print them out full scale, and I kind of look, and you know, it looks like you just go like this, but there's a lot of subtlety to those curves that just kind of, you know, a little bit will make you feel something. Yeah, here are some of the drawings. And then, of course, once they get printed out at scale at 8, 10, 12 feet tall, then there's sort of more correcting. But yes, this is how it starts. Pages and pages of these, you just start sketching these guys out, and then suddenly one kind of seems a little more pathetic or silly or triumphant or has a kind of personality as kind of a character. And then you take that one out, and then you make a new page of drawings based on that one, and then of that page, maybe one of those has a little more character. Because again, that's another thing. It's minimal, but it has to be a sort of a character for me to be interested, and a little bit of a statue, a little bit of a character. So. Yeah.
They kind of read on the right here, almost like language, lettering, or runes, or something, glyphs.
Yeah, definitely a hieroglyphic thing. But the hieroglyphic thing, honestly, kind of developed out of the drawing. I just started doing the drawings, and then sometimes you have a negative space, and you just go to fit one in the negative space.
Right.
And you're sort of like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I could use that, or maybe I could luck into a sculpture here. So just do pages and pages, and eventually, you know, you're going to hit on something good. Yeah, so here's the model and one of the first sketches for Tandem, the one that's up at Lincoln Center right now.
The sketch, it just sits right on the ground. There's no base.
Yeah, it sits. At first, I was conceiving them on the ground, and then for levels of practicality, we had to kind of protect them, and actually, I kind of like them up on the bases. I think it gives them a kind of statue in the town square feeling, a little bit more, you know, and counteracts their cartooniness. So I'm all happy with that.
They're kind of rising, as statues often do.
Yeah, and this base particularly, I liked that I got to make it jut off the base a little bit, kind of stick off like it's sliding off there. And this is a kind of couples piece, if any of you have had relationships.
This is the sexy one.
Yeah, you're holding it together.
We talked
you're
about that in
sliding
class.
off the bass. You know, it's not as easy as it looks long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Here it is on the left in process, naked without the patination, and then on the right in situ.
Yeah.
And then I thought this was interesting because I managed to somehow take a photo on the left, which is the same perspective that you used in the sketch before I saw the sketch. So how did you decide about the sighting, how to orient them, in the space?
Well, this one particularly, but all of them a bit. It's a conversation between what you want to do and what the Parks Department thinks is permissible as far as pedestrian traffic flow and all of that. So there's a lot of meetings involved with projects like this. You meet, you talk about it, you shift it around, you put markers out, you get everybody to agree on it, and then that's where you place it. But I was lucky that I twisted it around. I kind of got it close to where I wanted it. Made everybody happy. Everybody's happy, Jason.
Good. Happiness is the key. That's what Larry said. I believe it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Carl. Wait, do you have a quick early memory of public art that affected you? 2 seconds, and then we'll get to...
Actually, interestingly, it's not public art, but I grew up in a small town in the Hudson Valley, and so there was...
Sleepy Town.
Sleepy Town. I was born in Sleepy Hollow, but there's no public art. But when I thought about that, I thought the first thing that impacted me was this church that was in the town next to mine. That was a regular-looking church, but then it had this weird sagging roof. I haven't thought about this in years and years, but it was the first thing when I was a little kid out the window of the car. I was like, "Hey, Dad, what's going on over there?" He's like, "It's just a church. Don't worry about it." And I'm like, "But that roof." He's like, but I can remember this sag of the roof.
That's it.
And I hadn't thought about it in years, so thank you for that
The
question.
slumping roof.
That slumping roof, it never left me.
The roof. All right.
Okay.
Torkwase, thank you so much for being here. My student, Gisela Colón, gave a magnificent, was highly moved by visiting your work, Akua, which is in Brooklyn at the park right now. It's up through March. You can see it in all seasons. And just to sort of show a few of your earlier works, maybe just talk for a couple minutes about this project and the one from the Whitney Biennial before we look at Akua for a couple minutes. Liquid A place, Desert X. Desert X moves around. It's not always in the same desert. Okay, my bad. I didn't understand that. Okay, but this one's in California. Was in California. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here. I just want to say I really love those pieces, and I think about dance, and I think about touch and the haptic, even though the surfaces don't necessarily invite the haptic, but I do think about
Thank you so
touch.
much.
So this is the first time I'd really spent any significant time in the desert. And I pick up this question of distance often in my work, thinking about the politics of distance now in relationship to the history of the politics of light and space. And I said, well, after light, space, and perspective, what other thing can we philosophically introduce in the minds of art making? So sort of distance is mine. So in thinking about work and making work that is to be embodied and interacted with, I think about, in this particular work, the distance of water in the space, the distance of time in the space, and how one transverses the work both in and over and around and up and down, hopefully evoking a condition of improvisation. So this work was very much about the distance between a subjective experience and a difference between an objective experience, one like touch or then one like seeing in the distance, and creating metaphor, creating allegory after one's belief. So I'm interested in the sort of extreme subjective experience and its relationship, not to the universal, I don't necessarily believe in that, but to space as a sort of physical form.
And the desert, which is shaped by water.
Yes.
And then you're reintroducing water in this piece. How? tell people because I love this part.
Oh, the idea that your body is the water. And we're all walking, liquid with structures that keep our liquidity moving down street or avenue or park.
I think it's a line from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Data called someone bag of mostly water.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we are.
Yeah,
but this is a more
absolutely.
poetic way, where you have this amazing sort of bunker-like structure in the desert, but then without the human element, it remains arid and kind of alien presence. Here is the work which I hope many of you saw at the Whitney. This is called Liquid Shadows, Solid Dreams, a monastic playground. This is part of it. On the roof, overlooking the Hudson there. This is kind of a northwest view. One section of it here. It's a multiplicity of materials, including rock, big stone that's set into it here. But coolest thing I liked about it is you could climb on it, you could touch it, you could meditate on it, you could pray to it, you could lean on it, you could take a nap, whatever. This is part of it, and then this is the section I showed you is there on the far right, and here is the other massive section. And it includes also what Torkwase calls 4 paintings, which are the kind of semi-vertical sections that she painted with some of her sort of trademark iconography. A bit like Carl's using these forms as glyphs, Torkwase has an amazing iconography which relates in a complicated way that we don't have time to talk about to Black histories and colonial oppression, and also the idea of enslavement and release, freeing yourself from enslavement. So a work like this, and a work like the one that we just saw in the desert, Torkwase, they're public-private, right? So they're kind of public, but they're kind of private, because to get to them, to be a part of them, you have to go through some kind of steps, to do it. And then when you get to Akua, we're talking public art, right? Am I right to make this sort of distinction?
Yes.
So this is what you must go see if you haven't already in Brooklyn Bridge Park. So maybe talk to us a little bit about this work.
Sure. This work was commissioned by Public Art Fund. Hi, Melanie, who's here, who's a real champion of mine. And it's another example of what it means to make something from a really personal place and then extend it into the space. It's titled after a cousin of mine, and it was inspired by the way she says my name. In thinking about the ways in which geography happens in our voices and happens in our utterances, and thinking about, I was listening to a song this morning that I thought I'd bring up, thinking about Akua. And a woman, I enjoy when women sing and talk at the same time. This is a song, but it sounds a bit like talking. So Akua was the opportunity for me to take voice and take sound and move it across the space and treat it like I treat my drawings and my paintings. So it's an immersive sound installation with 8 channels. And the channels and the sound is sort of mapped out through drawing, right? So I'm taking drawing up as a way to sort of map, use ideas of improvisation, but also deep coherence. I'm actually interested in coherence and distance as subjects beyond time, space, and light. I think, as we inherit the history of sound, space, and light, I think that ideas of distance and coherence have to be negotiated while we're under this constant condition of dispossession. So Akua claims that space of coherence. It claims that space of improvisation. It claims that space where you have an experience that is eternal and visceral, and lights, from the sun and the sight of the river and the, public space is all sort of built in, but then you sit in it, and then you sort of grasp the condition of coherence. You sort of grasp with even the sound in the space. So sound is geography, distance, coherence, presence, and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wrong for us to just show you slides, because you must go and be inside of it and feel the sound. It has 8 speakers. You can see them along the top. And there were times when we were doing class there and we had to leave because it was too loud to talk, which is what you want, I'm sure. But the sound of the water, like you're on a ship and you're on the ocean passage. And then music, Joseph was totally moved by, I think it was a cover of Bette Midler's The Rose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You really, oh, I met you.
Yeah. No, none of the students knew this song.
Hi.
You all know the song, The Rose. None
Oh
of the
my
students
goodness.
knew the song, and then it came on.
Oh, so that's my mother singing that song, Madison. So, yeah, it's a beautiful song. I actually heard that song. I was in London and working on another liquid project, and my mother sent me that song. And I've been waiting, trying to figure out how to put it in space. And a couple of my friends are singing in this work, but if you sit with it, the sound, of course, the water it's about volume, right? It's about this kind of condition of volume. And I built a sound studio in my painting studio. And then I understood how sound is also material. And you can create a condition of volume and treat it like drawing. You go from a volume to a line. So rose is a sort of line in relationship to water as a sort of volume.
I think drawing is inherent to all three of your practices. It's critical. That's where everything kind of comes from in these works. And it's about the hand translated into something else, or the light, like Anthony's using in his works, translated into something else on a larger scale. I'm ready to go back there, but also I want it to snow and go and see it in the snow. Just to end, because I have 28 seconds, the idea of these panels I've always thought is it makes you think about what these amazing artists have been doing, but also takes you out into the world and impacts the way you think about everything else you're seeing. So I don't know if anyone's seen the Ruth Asawa show yet. At MoMA, it's magnificent. Here's a typical installation of the sculpture, but what really struck me was the public art. And the idea of her making public art initially works which are shockingly figurative. I don't spend a lot of time in San Francisco, so I don't know these works. This mermaid fountain for this woman, Andrea, who was the model, with, on the left, nursing mermaids, right? This was her first public art project. It does not look like the Ruth Asawa that we know from David Zwirner exhibitions. But at the same time, then, she did works that were a play on the folded paper compositions that she was doing, and these are the origami fountains in Japantown in San Francisco, since recast in bronze, originally steel, which here is the idea of what we've been talking about, abstract art. How does it connect? How do you see it? How do the elements play into it? Do you notice it at all? Do you see it and think it's, oh, that's a Ruth Asawa? But then other works like these, just to conclude, this incredible fountain at the Hyatt Hotel, hence the double H, which she did in collaboration with school children. I really encourage you to go to this exhibition, and which looks like the Trajan's Column in Rome, adapted to a modern circumstance, and which has to do with her experience in a Japanese internment camp, her family history, and working with children in the area. And the photo on the left of her with her own kid, grandchild, I think, there in front of another one of these projects. So just this idea that, you know, here's an artist who worked in multiplicity of forms, depending on the situation. We're dealing with three artists here who really do work with abstraction concretely. But that's what I love about this and what we do, which is that it expands into everything that you're looking at. So thank you so much to the three of you. Sorry we're a little bit over. Thank you to the audience and my students.
Thank you, Jason, Anthony, Carl, Torkwase. And just we'll quickly go into our performance to conclude. So if everybody has just a few more minutes to stay in their seats, I promise it's a treat. Okay, now we're back. Great. So as we close out today's program, we'll shift slightly from all of our discussions about visual art to music, though of course we still remain inspired by Larry. And I've considered the many different ways to poetically share this fun fact, but Simply put, Larry loves guitars. The video that you're seeing here shows his collection at his studio, where he has about 300 and more and counting instruments. Earlier this year, for the New York Times, he shared that his collection is about his passion for, quote, improbable things, end quote. I will kind of skip over this anecdote, but just to quickly share, when Larry began to collect these guitars, he was 17. It was actually a 12-string guitar that interested him. He'd never seen anything like it before, and as he recalls, when he strummed his fingers across the guitar, he could feel it. More than just hear it, there was that resonance of the feeling. And while it doesn't compare to Larry's dedication, I've learned quite a lot about 12-string guitars in planning for this performance. So I'm incredibly excited for us to translate the visual elements of Larry's work into a performance that's going to be full of layers and harmonies. And we are incredibly grateful to have Elias Solomon here with us. Solomon is a Brooklyn-born, New York-based guitarist. He plays throughout New York City in various styles of music: funk, jazz, hip-hop, rock, and musical theater. Solomon is a member of the funk and jazz fusion group, Mode 4, formed with fellow Borough of Manhattan Community College graduates. He currently attends the New School's College of Performing Arts, studying jazz and contemporary music, and is a guitar teacher with NYC Guitar School. Elias, take us away.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. Come to the park to see Larry Bell. Go to our website to see what else we do and to support us, and have a great rest of your Friday. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Am I safe to unfold? Yes. I'm gonna grab the cases. I'll be